Hello, my name's Tim Kenny of Tim Kenny Surveying, and a couple of weeks ago I did a video just talking about the equipment I use to record my site notes, and I want to do another one just showing you that process in action really. So that's what we're going to try and do today. As you can see here, I've got my site note template opened up in OneNote, program I use because it just kind of it came free with the computer almost as it's set up as part of the Microsoft Office package, so you've got Word, Excel and everything else, so it sits within that package of software. So most of us use Word or some combination of those programs, so it comes free as part of that package, so worth looking at whether you want to use it. Great for all sorts of kind of note taking and everything else. Really useful on a bit of kit that you can write on the screen. So I use a stylus and I handwrite all my site notes. And I like this format because it just replicates the kind of the paper site note process that I grew up using as a sort of when I started my process, and I feel it's quite nice for me. Works really well for the sort of properties I do and sort of types of survey I work with, and sort of certainly the type of reporting that I do. Don't use an awful lot of kind of pre-population from the report itself, and that can work really great for certain things. It's not how I work, so I like this setup. You say the program itself really useful, really easy to use, lots of bits and pieces that you can do with it. Here all I've done is import a PDF version of my site note template into the software. I originally actually started by literally just importing the PDFs of my site note template straight in, as literally in exactly the same way that I used to use them printed out, and I would write over the top of them. Over the years I have developed them, adapted them, made them a little bit easier to use in this format. As we go through, you'll see there is actually a couple of my pages that are still exactly as they were within my paper software, paper site notes. They maybe don't work quite so well in this format, and I know I do need to update them. They're perhaps kind of the ones with the most information on, so they've probably been the hardest ones to update. As you can see here, we drift over to the left hand side. I've got template and template test. So what I do is I have each page of my site notes set up in a template, and then I'll just copy that for each property as I'm doing that, and literally it's just a process of click on it as you would do anything else, move and copy a new one and work on that. I actually have a test one, so quite often I will update the software, I'll update the site notes, and I'll put them in a test one, and I'll use them in that test one for a while, just to make sure that they're working well and everything else. If they don't work well, I can then drop back to the original template. And actually what we're going to look at today is my current test setup, kind of what I'm using day to day at the moment, because I've recently updated site notes. I'll probably do it again in 6 months, 12 months time, just to make sure it really does work as well as it can do. There'll be things like add, take off. If I kind of really find that I'm kind of writing down the same thing every time, then I'll try and make a box for it or do something different with it. Okay, so as we then go through, you'll see that there are a whole list of pages down the side here, and mostly I use a lot of pages for my site notes. I don't worry about how many pages they are. That's again the great thing about this software and we're doing it digitally. I can have I don't know how many pages are there. That's kind of set up for a standard type survey. If it were a big one, that could drift to sort of 30 pages quite happily. If you're trying to use that number of bits of paper, just literally physical bits of paper, that's quite a lot of shuffling, particularly if it's windy or rainy and all the other difficulties we face on a day-to-day basis. That would be quite complicated. With this, well, really just flicking between pages is of no effort, and it's quite good because you can flick back and forth between those pages quite easily. One of the kind of key reasons for having quite a lot of pages is it gives me quite a lot of space. One of the things that you do learn about trying to write on any kind of tablet like this is that it's very difficult to write neatly in small. Personally, my handwriting is abysmal to start with. So when you then take that into a tablet format like this, it gets a little bit worse. So I have to give myself plenty of space so I can write in big, nice kind of, big capital letters to make sure that it's legible, obviously for me or for anybody else who does need to look at my site notes. The other thing that you'll see on a lot of this is there's a lot of tick boxing. So I quite like a little tick box. there's no point just handwriting the same information every time. Obviously, again, as I said, my handwriting is bad, so I don't like doing that. If I can just do it with a little tick box, it makes life a lot easier. Okay, so going through some of the specific pages, got a general info page, your starting page, which includes the basic information about the property, what type of survey I'm doing, even how I'm going to get access to the property, whether it's getting it from the agents straight to the property or a key box. Again, quite often useful to put things like alarm codes in there because it's, it happens that you get a property with alarm code and you've kind of put it on a bit of paper, lost it, fine, leave it in the site notes. Again, important to keep those things secure. It's all part of the confidential information, but again, you should be keeping your site notes relatively secure as confidential information anyway, so that's not really an issue. Again, brief kind of desktop summary in there as well. It is theoretically possible to dump in, for example, the maps, like a flooding map and all those sorts of things within this as well, as little pictures, which could be quite helpful. I don't tend to do it, but if there was something specifically that you would get from that map that you might find useful to have on site, you could very easily drop this into here, a different page, or you could put it onto here, or whatever you want to do. Again, other bits of information down here about, what time you're starting it, what time you finished it, weather, all these things that are useful to know. The other thing I do tend to kind of note on here is some of the local services. So I don't do valuation. I don't include that for valuation purposes. I more include it for sustainability. So one of the things that I've incorporated into my reports recently is a lot more information about general sustainability of the property. And we're talking kind of moving beyond energy efficiency. How sustainable is that property going to be in the long term? And for a lot of people, that will include access to local services, be that public transport, health, sports and activity, all of these things that are really important to people. And again, as you'll see on most of these pages, I always have some space for handwritten notes set out within the template as well. But again, the great thing about the way this is set up is that, I've got all of this space over here that I could write something on. If I really wanted to, I could zoom right out and I could use all of this white space. And when I'll show you when I come to printing out my site notes to PDF, how you can work with that. But I've got essentially an unlimited amount of space to write on here. So although I've got tick boxes for the things I want to do in, and I've got some kind of note sections, if I wanted to write pages and pages of handwritten information, I could do that just as easily on this. Next one, obviously, construction info. I think most people's reports start with a brief description of the construction of the property, so I find it useful to have that as a first page. And again, one of the things I'm keen to always include is evidence of where my assumptions come from. So if I've assumed the building is, we'll do a little bit of handwriting, 1980s, so you can see it's not that easy to write neatly. I'm going to want to back that up with some kind of evidence, whether that be from, historic maps, or I've looked at the materials maybe that I feel are consistent, or there's something on the planning information that's there. But if I feel that's wrong, I can just rub it out with the other end of my stylus. So again, just your basic information about the property. And again, same thing on any extensions. And again, I've got this set up, for two extensions. Generally, you don't get that many, but if there were, I could just copy this page here, and I could insert another one here. So I've suddenly got two construction info pages, and I could put in as many extensions as I want. So you can kind of make it really adjust it to how the property works, how the property is set up. And again, one of the things I do as part of my desktop is to go through these site notes and produce a bespoke set for the property that I'm going to do. So you can see here that I've got, for example, four elevation pages set up for this one. If it were a mid-terrace, for example, I drop that down to only 2, or a semi-detached, it would have 3. And exactly the same on all the rooms. So I've got this up about 11 or 12 rooms, but again, I could scale that down to 4, or I could scale it up to 25, depending on how many were at the property. Same applies to lofts. If you've got a property with 3 lofts, well, then you have 3 loft pages. Nice and simple. So yeah, then obviously the next thing we have is a key. Always worth having a key in your site notes, just for those abbreviations that you do use regularly. And again, it's one that you're always going to be updating in your life. New things come in and you drop other things, you change your abbreviations to suit certain situations. And again, you can make these ones bespoke for each property as you're going around. Next page for me is always a site plan. I think, as I've said in other videos and other bits and pieces, one of the first things I always do is walk the site, get an understanding of exactly what's there, look at the boundaries, look at the grounds, look at where how the property is laid out itself, think about the roof layout, start to get that idea, that sense of what is physically there, and you're there to look at. And I'll always drop that down in a site plan. Again, good thing about OneNote is that you can change these you see how I've got this set up as a squared. I could have that ruled if I wanted to. I can have bigger squares. I can change these to whatever I'm setting up. So for a site plan, I like nice small squares. Generally properties are laid out on a rough rectangle or a square. Sometimes you get the odd ones, but this is how most of them set up. And you can draw, just freehand, simple lines, and you can start to lay out your property. Again, as you can see, it's not that easy to draw a straight line. I mean, I'm doing this in a slightly kind of awkward angle, but again, you can do a reasonable site plan with this. Again, it takes a little bit of getting used to. One of the things I do have on this is a screen protector, which does give a little bit more grip to the pen, so it feels better with that. Again, still not good, but it's good enough for the sort of drawing you need to do for a basic residential survey. Okay, moving on then, we've got grounds. So I split this up actually into grounds structures and grounds other. Again, as I said, I like to kind of have plenty of space to write things. I don't like to squidge things up too much. Nice big boxes, see what's going on, make it nice and clear and easy. And again, because we've got the flexibility to have as many pages as you want, I like to break things down. So ground structures, so that's your walls, fences, paving, and as you can see, very much a tick box kind of on this one, because not often that you have to really write that much detail on it. But again, we do have space for notes and limitations. We can put all of this information in here as well. Anything we want to do, we can work around that. But I've got all my basic information that I can set up on that. Grounds other, see, invasive species. Again, I think it's really important to very clearly specify that you have looked at these things, if that's part of your inspection process, and note down what you've looked at, how you've looked at it, and again, any notes, any limitations, and what's affecting that. Drainage, obviously. Rights of way, really important. If you spot one, to flag it up, can make a massive difference to your client buying it. Again, parking, we always tend to include that information because it's useful. Other bits and pieces you might include on here, for example, as whether there's charging for electric vehicles. Very common one that we need to start thinking about now. Any information that the boundaries might be a bit strange, anything odd going on with that, again, really useful to note with on this page. Moving on then, outbuildings. Once I've cleared the grounds, done all that bit, I'll then work on to the outbuildings, so I'll kind of excluding everything that's not the property first. And again, we've got the same thing, we've got, a little section for each outbuilding. Should we have more than 3? Again, we can just copy that page and have as many as we want. And we're just kind of knocking down that basic information, a little bit of information about defects. Again, if you want to get more specific, you can write it within the notes or put anything else you want to do on here. Other things that you could do usefully with something like this is drop in a photograph of each outbuilding. Again, if it's starting to get a little bit complicated as to what each outbuilding is, they've maybe got lots of sheds, you want to make sure that you know which set of notes applies to which outbuilding. Very easily, you can just insert a picture. So this has got a camera on the front, and you just simply go insert pictures from camera, and then you can just drop that into, for example, here. So if I was talking about the 5th shed, because we've got a massive building, someone's got a lot of sheds, and I want to make sure I've got every shed right, drop a little picture in here of that shed, so I know this set of notes applies to that shed. And then when I look at my photographs from my camera, for example, I can know I'm looking at the right shed in the right set of notes. Next one then, obviously we've cleared everything that's not the house. Time to start looking at the house itself. And again, we could just drop, if we're looking at the front elevation, you can drop a nice picture of the front elevation in this space here. So you can say, okay, the front elevation is this one. Because it's not always obvious what the front one is. Again, if you work on kind of north, south, east, west, or front, back, whatever it is, it's quite useful to put that photograph in there. So when you pick up these notes, look at your photographs, you can kind of connect the two together and make sure everything is really easy for yourself. Now I work top to bottom, and one of the things I need to do actually with this is kind of refresh the layout a little bit, because I'd rather it kind of the notes worked in the way I was looking at the property a little bit more. But I've kind of got used to this one, so I've kind of, it's one of those things that would be lovely to do, but with everything in life, it's, sometimes the nice to do things drop off a little bit. And I said again, I'm a massive fan of little tick boxes, so if I think it's a cavity wall, I'll tick it. If I think it's been filled, I'll tick it. And again, I can put in the little notes whether I think there's what my evidence for that is. It might be to do with the brick bond, it might be to do with the thickness, it might be to do with whether it's filled, whether there's drill holes present. Whatever it is, I can add that little bit of information in there. And again, this one, because of the way I've got it laid out, I've had to have quite small boxes, but what you can do is very much just zoom in. 2 fingers, as you would do on most bits of equipment. You can zoom in and you can write, whatever you like in that little box there. You can write as much as you really wanted to. And again, because you're always thinking about these digitally, so this is always going to be a digital file, once you print that to PDF, you can zoom in on the PDF. So it doesn't have to be clear at A4 size, because you have that zoom option to get in there and get in that exact detail. So say, lots of nice simple tick boxes, can pop photographs in here. The other really useful thing to do on this is actually kind of getting a photograph of any cracking. So as I said, you could take a photograph of the front elevation. Now, we all know trying to kind of get a photograph that really sort of sums up where maybe the cracks are on a building, particularly if it's a rendered property or it's got a textured render or something like that. Those cracks don't show up well on a photograph. So what you can very simply do, drop a photograph in here and then just sketch over the top where the cracks are. So you've got a really good record of that. And again, also it can be helpful when you're back at your desk. You can stop and you can look and you can see maybe whether there's a pattern to that, what it might mean and what it might mean in terms of the structure. Kind of the traditional way of doing that is obviously with drawing a little sketch of the front elevation and you draw them in, which again you could do on this if that was more your style, but I think it's just gives much more clarity if you can really do it from a photograph as opposed to trying to do your own sketch. And so at the end then we've got this one set up for 4, but again, you just delete or remove. If you work in a different way and you want 5, 6, 7 elevations, you can really easily do that with this. And then we move on to the loft. Now this is actually one of the few that is remaining from my original paper site notes, and you can probably see the difference. It's much more densely laid out, and what will probably happen is over time I'll actually probably separate this out into maybe 2 pages just to make it a little bit easier for myself. But again, you've just got all these little boxes that allow you just to kind of very quickly and easily note down the relevant information. Even simple things like whether there's a ladder fitted, whether it's got a light or a TV aerial, these things that are useful to know. Again, you start kind of thinking about some of the specific things you want to kind of confirm that you have checked for. So for example here, you'll see I've got a little box for diagonal cross bracing in a truss roof. Very simple, just to kind of make sure that you've checked that. Again, yes, you can back it up with photographs, but it's really nice to have within your notes a little tick box saying, yep, I have definitely looked for that, and it is there and it's present. Obviously, if it's not present, there's an issue. The other thing I like to do sometimes on pages is highlight things in red. So for example, if I think I've got an issue with an infestation, now I can tick it to say there's an issue with an infestation, but maybe if I'm coming back through my notes, that's not really that clear. So very simply, tick it in red or put a nice cross over it in red. You can use these kind of highlighting colours to show you exactly what's going on, bring your eye to things, much as you would do on paper site notes if you use an old-fashioned 4-colour pen. It's kind of what I always used to use anyway. So again, you've got all these simple bits of information noted down. You can tick them off easily, and again, as always, you've got plenty of space for notes. One of the things you'll see on here is I've got a page number section on this one, which I don't actually have on any of the rest of them. Very simply because it automatically prints to PDF, so that page numbering is already set. Really important to put page numbers on your paper notes, of course, because they can get out of order. You can lose one. You've got to know how many are supposed to be there. If you don't know how many are supposed to be there, you can very easily lose one. But none of that problem with the way this is set up. All happens automatically for you, so really makes life a whole lot easier. Nice blank one for you here, but that's floor plan. And again, Personally, I will take the estate agent's floor plan, drop it in here. Again, really useful if you want to make notes over the top of that, draw things over the top of that. But again, if the estate agent haven't been helpful and giving you a nice floor plan, you can pop in the grid lines and you can do your own one in there. Again, you've got all that space to do what you need to do. Internal inspection then, so obviously we've been around the outside, we've been up in the loft, because I start up in the loft. Next thing I tend to do is wander around the property and look at all the services and all the kind of the bits and pieces that don't fit nicely within each room, and I'll do that within here. Put out the number of the rooms and bits and pieces in that, and bits about the stairs and how the smoke alarms, the boiler, all of these bits and pieces that are useful to note down. I quite like doing it in this order because it's a chance for me just to kind of familiarise myself with the inside of the property. I tend to have a quick wander around to start with anyway, but again, as you're kind of going around and looking at all the covers and the bits and pieces, it can work quite well. Obviously, over the last couple of years, we've had to be a little bit more careful about how you move around the property and if somebody's there and what you do if they need to move out of the way. So I've kind of tried to limit my movements around the property as much as possible when someone is present. So what I'll tend to do is I'll pick these up as I'm going around the rooms in an occupied property. And again, this is why this is such an easy way of doing it. You know, if I've gone through, worked around several rooms, and actually I need to come back and note something for the internal inspection, well, very easily, just flick back. You know, I'm not having to shuffle through my bits of paper to find it. I can just flick back to where I was and note it in, and then immediately go back to the room I was working on and go through from there. Which of course then brings us onto the rooms. So obviously room name, and again you can do the same thing you do with elevations on this one. You could drop a picture in of the room. So stand by the door, take a picture into the room, and that gives you a quick visual reminder of which room you're talking about. Although yeah, you can kind of put the room name in here. So we start with bedroom 1, for example. So bedroom 1 in the room name, and I can know that kind of connects back to a floor plan. But actually I've got that visual cue in here, I've got that picture in there. When I'm looking through my photographs, I know which set of photographs will apply to that room. So it's again, very easy way of doing it. I tend to fill in the room name before I get there. So again, I kind of pre-plan the order that I'm going to go around that property, just because I think it's a nice easy way of doing it. I have a kind of a standard pattern is to do bedroom 1 first, and then I'll do any ensuite connected with that bedroom. Then I'll go around to the kind of, probably I'll then work to the next closest room. So I try and think about which room is the easiest to get to. Kind of think about the pattern that you're going to go around that room. I know some people like to work in a preset pattern, and that can be really helpful because you know your photographs are going to follow a preset pattern. But again, because I'll have a photograph showing each room on here, it's a bit easier for me to kind of chop and change my picture order. So here again, so I know, I do bedroom 1, say for example bedroom 3 was the next one in the down the hall. I'll do bedroom 3, and then it might be a bathroom or bedroom 4 or bedroom 2 or whatever it is. I'll work around. I'll try and make that as quick a process as possible. One of the key things that I think is always important is to make sure you include landings and hallways as a room by themselves. And again, that's quite important. That's quite again, it's useful to have this room by room process. And I'll say it because the one and only claim I've had in my career was pretty much because I kind of didn't treat a hallway as a room. I didn't take the same number of pictures that I would normally take for a living room or a bedroom in a hallway. Missed a certain bit of furniture, and that caused problems. So I've learned from that. I've brought that into my process. So I would go bedroom 1, bedroom 2, bedroom 3, bathroom, landing, and then next one would be the hallway. So I make sure that I am actually recording, the same quality of information for a landing or a hallway as I am for a bedroom or a living room. And I make sure then that I'm covering myself and avoiding any missed problems or errors. So again, you can see on here that I've got, again, just all that basic information that you really need to know, and you can detail, what the walls are made of, what the floor's made of, all these things that is very simple standard information, but quite nice and easy just to cover off with a quick tick box. And again, we've always got space for notes and limitations. The other thing I like to have in here, you'll see this little box here, is confirm damp meter readings taken at 1 meter intervals internally where possible, normal unless indicated by a star. So tick that. So I've said that I have taken damp meter readings within a standard pattern within that room. Now I know a lot of people like to kind of record a bit more information about where they've taken damp meter readings and things like that, and that's absolutely fine. This is what I do, and it works for me. Again, something you can do with this is take a picture, include it within here, and then you can draw it up with, you know, the different colours. So fortunately I haven't got a picture to hand, so we'll pretend this is my picture of a wall, and I've got a sofa here, for example. You can see my nice artistic skills coming in handy here, and I've taken meter readings, and I've got a selection of meter readings here that are high, and then by this point they've got low. You know, again, just gives me a nice visual cue within a photograph of how those meter readings might be laid out. You know, and again, we can change the colour of these pictures, colour of these pens, sorry. So I want to do some orange ones. So I've got that gradation quite directly on a photograph. Very simple, easy way of doing it. But also we can say, you know, got my photograph here, I couldn't get behind these. So you might want to mark this one up saying no, and then you do that. And then you might write right there, no readings. So again, you've got a really clear, simple way of showing what readings you have and haven't taken within a room. All marked up on a photograph, so they're as accurate as you can reasonably be within the circumstances. And again, you know, if it's not quite right, rub it all out, start again. So yeah, that's just a kind of a quick run through of how those notes work. Last thing I want to show you is talking about how you then save those as a PDF version. You know, in normal circumstances, you probably see along this section here 3 or 4 properties that I'm currently working on, whether it's one that I'm, you know, I have just inspected and haven't yet written up, or in the process of writing up. I tend to also leave them there until I've kind of spoken to the client afterwards as well, because I find this the quick and easiest way to flick through those notes. But for today, I've actually kind of gone through and printed them all out and got them all cleared away just for data protection purposes. But it's useful to try and do it on a regular basis. I did early on kind of get a little bit behind, and I think I got to about 20 properties here and then had to kind of go through and, you know, eventually catch up with by printing them off. Doesn't take too long, but if you don't get into that good habit, it does tend to run a little bit behind. But anyway, very simple to do. So you see 3 little dots up here, click on that, click on the little print button here, brings you up a print menu. Now you can see it's currently set up to print current page, so this would literally just print this one page. You can see just page 1 of 1. You have to change that to current section, so each property sits within a section as far as OneNote is concerned, and that should then be set up to print these out. Got a little bit awry somewhere, so we can sort that out, but each one of these then is a separate page. Looks a bit odd, so I actually always print mine out in A3, print to PDF in A3, because I've never been able to manage to get this set up to get exactly right. I'm sure if you were a little bit more technically competent, you could get your template to fit exactly within an A3 page. I've never been able to manage it, but as I said, you know, I'm quite often adding things around the side of a template, whether that's a photograph or some extra notes or something else, or even a drawing sometimes. So I always like to go to A3, so that's under more settings, paper size A3. Because again, you know, these are only ever being printed out digitally. You're not going to print them out to paper. You know, should your insurers need them, they'll only want them as PDF. They don't want them as bits of paper, and they'll look at them on a screen. And that's very much as easy to do in A3 as it is A4. And yeah, and that just prints out, and then you save it. And so you see here we've got 25 pages. They'll all fit to one page, hopefully, when it's set up properly. And we'll note nicely, so you can then just save that within your property file, and you've got your permanent digital record, obviously appropriately backed up onto a separate hard drive or a cloud storage or whatever you want. Nice, easy, simple storage. So yeah, that's kind of a fairly quick run through of how my site notes work. Hopefully it's useful for you. If you kind of any questions, comments you want, kind of if you've got any suggestions of better ways of doing it, I'm always happy to listen to those, because, you know, as I say, this is just how I do it, because this is almost the process that I've picked up, the habit that I've picked up. Never going to say this is the best way of doing it. This is my current way of doing it. If you want to kind of make a suggestion for a different or better way, then I'd love to hear those, because if I can find a quick and easiest way to make my site notes as useful and effective and protecting as possible, then I'm always welcome to hear it. But yeah, if you've got any questions or want a little bit of help with setting up something like this yourself, then please do give me a shout. Thank you very much.